Hey there, sleepy history nerds. Tonight, we're settling in for a long, slow journey through a world of stone, sweat, and ambition. A world where people didn't just build houses, they built fortresses that could withstand armies, time, and the occasional rogue cow wandering through the wrong gate. Welcome to Boring History for Sleep, where we're diving into the painstaking, backbreaking, and downright obsessive process of how a medieval castle was built, step by step. No Hollywood knights or shining armor here. Just dirt, math, and a whole lot of people who probably regretted signing up for this job. So, dim the lights, fluff that pillow, and let's drift into the year 1180, where your Wi-Fi is non-existent, your tools are blunt, and your life's goal is to stack rocks so well they scare your enemies into submission. Ready? Let's start at the very beginning, because building a castle isn't just construction. It's a saga. Picture this, you're standing on a windswept hill in medieval Europe. The air smells of damp earth and distant wood smoke. Below you, a muddy village huddles around a church, its steeple barely taller than the tallest peasant's dreams. But your lord, some guy with a fancy title like Baron de Snootington or Earl of Grumpyface, has decided this patch of nowhere needs a castle. Why? Because power isn't just about who has the most swords. It's about who has the biggest, scariest pile of stones. Castles aren't just homes. They're statements. They say, I'm here, I'm rich, and if you try to mess with me, you'll regret it. But before a single stone is laid, there's a decision to make. Where do you build this thing? Location is everything, and medieval lords weren't picking spots based on scenic views or proximity to a good tavern. The first step in building a castle is choosing the site, and this is where strategy meets paranoia. A good castle site needs to be defensible, which means it's ideally perched on a hill, surrounded by natural barriers like rivers, cliffs, or marshes. Hills are great because attackers have to slog uphill while dodging arrows, boiling oil, or whatever else the defenders feel like chucking down. Rivers are even better. Try swimming across one in chainmail while someone's lobbing rocks at your head. But it's not just about defense. The site needs to be near resources. A forest for timber, a quarry for stone, and enough farmland to feed the army of workers you're about to exploit. Oh, and water. You need a reliable water source, because nothing ruins a siege faster than everyone inside dying of thirst, while the enemy camps outside eating your stolen sheep. Let's say our lord picks a rocky hill overlooking a river bend, with a forest a mile away and a quarry just beyond that. Perfect. Now what? You don't just start piling rocks. First, you need a plan. And in the 12th century, that plan comes from a guy called a master mason. Think of him as the medieval equivalent of an architect, engineer, and project manager rolled into one, except he's got no computer, no blueprints, and a temper that could make a warhorse flinch. The master mason is the brain of the operation. He's the one who knows how to make walls that don't fall over, arches that don't collapse, and towers that don't lean like a drunken peasant at a festival. He's not working alone, though. He's got a team of assistants, surveyors, and a small army of laborers who are about to spend the next decade of their lives regretting their career choices. The master mason starts by sketching the castle's layout, but don't imagine some fancy parchment with precise lines. He's probably scratching a rough design into the dirt with a stick, or, if he's feeling fancy, using a piece of vellum that costs more than a peasant's yearly wages. The plan is simple at first. A keep, the big central tower where the lord lives. A curtain wall, the outer defensive wall, and maybe a gatehouse to make sure unwanted guests don't stroll in for tea. But simple doesn't mean small. Even a modest castle could cover acres, and a big one, it's basically a small city with better defenses than your average kingdom. The mason's job is to turn this dirt sketch into reality, and that starts with clearing the land. Clearing the site is no small task. That hill you picked is probably covered in trees, rocks, and the occasional angry badger who doesn't appreciate being evicted. Workers, mostly local peasants roped into this through feudal obligation, start hacking away with axes, picks, and sheer desperation. Trees are felled for timber, which will be used for scaffolding, tools, and temporary shelters. Rocks are cleared or broken up, and the ground is leveled as much as possible. This isn't a quick job. It could take weeks or even months, depending on the terrain. And while the peasants are sweating, the master mason is pacing around, muttering about angles and load-bearing walls, probably scaring everyone with his intense stare. Once the site is cleared, it's time to dig. Oh, you thought building a castle was all about stacking stones upward? Nope. First, you go down. Every castle needs foundations, and in the Middle Ages, that means digging trenches deep enough to make your back ache just thinking about it. These trenches will hold the base of the walls and the keep, and they need to be deep, sometimes 10 feet or more, to support the weight of all that stone. The workers use wooden shovels and picks, their hands blistering as they chip away at rocky soil. If the site has a moat in the plan, and let's be real, every self-respecting castle wants a moat. They're digging that too. A wide, deep ditch that will later be filled with water to keep attackers at bay. The dirt from these trenches isn't wasted. It's piled up to create extra defenses, like earthen ramps or berms. While the digging happens, the master mason is finalizing the castle's design. He's not just thinking about how it looks, but how it functions. The keep needs to be a fortress within a fortress, a last stand if the outer walls fall. The curtain wall needs to be thick, sometimes 10 or 15 feet thick, to withstand battering rams and catapults. The gatehouse needs to be a death trap for anyone foolish enough to try breaking in. And don't forget the latrines. Yes, even medieval warlords needed to go, and they didn't want to leave the castle to do it. The mason's plan includes everything: towers for archers, storerooms for food, a well for water, and a chapel because you don't want God mad at you while you're fighting off an invasion. This planning stage is critical because once you start building, there's no going back. Stone isn't forgiving. If you miscalculate a wall's thickness or an arch's curve, the whole thing could collapse, and then you're not just out of a job, you're probably out of a head. The master mason relies on experience, geometry, and a bit of trial and error wisdom passed down from older masons. He's not using a calculator because, it's 1180, but he's got tools like plumb bobs, levels, and measuring rods to keep things precise. He's also got a vision. This castle isn't just a building. It's a symbol of power, a fortress of fear, and a home for a lord who expects it to last longer than his family's bloodline. By now, the site is starting to look like something. The trenches are dug, the ground is cleared, and the master mason's plan is ready. But here's the kicker: nothing's been built yet. All this work, weeks, maybe months of labor, and you've got nothing to show for it but a big hole in the ground and a pile of dirt. That's medieval construction for you. Slow, grueling, and not exactly rewarding. The workers are tired, the lord is impatient, and the master mason is already arguing with the guy in charge of the quarry about why the stones aren't here yet. And trust me, getting those stones is a whole other adventure. But that's where we're headed next. Alright, you're still with me, drifting through the muddy, sweaty world of medieval castle building. Last time, we left our intrepid crew of peasants and one very stressed master mason standing on a cleared hill, staring at a bunch of trenches and a pile of dirt. It's 1180, and you're trying to build a castle that'll make invaders think twice and your lord look like the toughest guy in the Shire. But here's the thing, you can't build a castle without materials, and in the Middle Ages, materials don't come from a medieval Home Depot. Getting the stuff to make this fortress happen is a logistical nightmare that makes modern supply chain issues look like a bad day at the post office. So, let's roll up our scratchy wool sleeves and dive into the next step: gathering the raw materials to turn this dirt patch into a stone behemoth. First up, stone. Castles are basically giant rock sculptures, and you need a lot of it, thousands of tons, in fact. The good news? You picked a site near a quarry, because hauling stone from 50 miles away would make everyone quit before lunch. The bad news? Quarrying stone in the Middle Ages is about as fun as wrestling a pig in a rainstorm. The quarry is a chaotic symphony of clanging tools, shouting workers, and the occasional rock slide that reminds everyone why this job has a high turnover rate. Workers, again mostly peasants who drew the short straw, use iron picks, wedges, and hammers to chip away at the rock face. They're not just hacking randomly. They're cutting blocks to the rough size the master mason needs. Limestone is a popular choice because it's soft enough to carve but hardens over time, making it perfect for walls and towers. Sandstone works too, but it's trickier to shape. Granite? Forget it. Too hard for medieval tools unless you've got a death wish or a lot of spare time. Cutting stone is only half the battle. Once you've got a block free, you need to move it. These aren't pebbles. A single block could weigh a ton or more. Workers use wooden rollers, sledges, or ox-drawn carts to drag the stones to the site. If the quarry's close, you're lucky, maybe a day's journey. If it's farther, you're looking at weeks of hauling, with oxen that don't care about your deadlines and carts that break every time you hit a rut. And don't forget the roads, or rather, the lack of them. Medieval roads are often just muddy tracks that turn into swamps when it rains, which is basically every other day. The workers curse, the oxen slip, and the master mason is back at the site, tapping his foot and wondering why his stone delivery is late again. While the stone crew is busy, another team is tackling timber. Castles need wood for scaffolding, roofing, doors, and temporary structures like workers' huts. The nearby forest you scouted earlier is now a hive of activity. Axemen fell trees, oak or ash, ideally because they're strong and durable. The sound of chopping echoes through the valley, along with the occasional yell when a tree falls the wrong way. Once the trees are down, they're stripped of branches and dragged to the site, either by manpower or oxen. Some logs are left whole for beams. Others are sawn into planks by hand, using two-man saws in a process so slow it could make a snail impatient. Sawdust covers everything, and the workers' hands are raw from splinters. Oh, and if the forest belongs to the Lord, great. If not, you're negotiating with some other noble who's charging you a fortune for every tree, because medieval bureaucracy loves to make everything harder. Then there's the less glamorous stuff. Lime for mortar, clay for bricks, and sand for mixing. Lime is made by burning limestone in a kiln, which is a fancy way of saying you're cooking rocks in a giant fire pit until they turn into a powdery substance that burns your skin if you touch it. Workers shovel limestone into the kiln, keep the fire going for days, and then collect the lime, coughing through clouds of dust. Clay and sand are dug up locally, often from riverbanks, and carted to the site in wobbly wheelbarrows. All this material gathering is happening at once, with different teams spread across the landscape, each dealing with their own flavor of misery. The quarry workers are dodging falling rocks. The forest crew is fighting off bugs, and the lime burners are wondering if their lungs will ever recover. Back at the site, the master mason is starting to see progress. The first cartloads of stone and timber are arriving, and the trenches are ready for the next step, laying the foundations. This is where the castle starts to feel real, but it's also where things get tricky. The foundations have to be perfect, because if they're not, your castle will be leaning like a bad metaphor by the time you're done. Workers start by filling the trenches with rubble, small stones, gravel, anything to create a stable base. Then comes the mortar, a mix of lime, sand, and water that's stirred in giant vats until it's the consistency of gritty oatmeal. The first layer of stones, called the footing, is laid carefully, each block checked with a level to make sure it's even. These stones are massive, often wider than the wall itself, to spread the weight and keep the structure from sinking into the ground. Laying the foundation is slow, methodical work. The workers are on their knees, trowels in hand, slathering mortar and fitting stones like a giant, deadly jigsaw puzzle. The master mason is everywhere, barking orders, checking angles, and probably muttering about how nobody respects geometry anymore. If the site has a moat, they're also building the foundation for a drawbridge or gatehouse, which means even more digging and stone laying in waterlogged conditions. The air smells of wet earth, lime, and sweat, and the workers are starting to realize this job might take years. Spoiler, it will. A modest castle could take 5 to 10 years to build. A big one, like Dover or Carnarvon, could take decades. As the foundation takes shape, the master mason is already thinking ahead to the walls. Medieval walls aren't just stacks of stone. They're engineering marvels. The outer face is made of neatly cut stones called ashlar, fitted so tightly you can barely slide a knife between them. The inner face might be rougher, but the core of the wall is rubble and mortar, packed in to save time and materials. This sandwich-style construction makes the walls thick and strong, able to withstand a battering ram or a siege engine. But building them requires precision, and that's where the mason's tools come in. Plumb lines to keep things vertical, wooden templates to shape arches, and a lot of yelling to make sure nobody drops a 2-ton block on their foot. By now, the site is buzzing. Carts creak under the weight of stone, oxen bellow, and workers grumble about the lack of brakes. The Lord is probably riding by on his horse, looking pleased but also annoyed that it's not done yet. The master mason, meanwhile, is juggling 1,000 problems. Late deliveries, bad weather, and that one guy who keeps chiseling stones into the shape of his own face. But slowly, the castle is starting to rise. The foundations are in, the first courses of stone are laid, and the dream of a fortress is taking shape. It's still a long way from finished, but for the first time, you can see it. A silhouette against the sky, a promise of power carved in stone. Welcome back to our slow, soothing descent into the world of medieval castle building, where every stone is a story and every worker is one bad day away from running off to join a monastery. We're knee-deep in 1180, standing on a muddy hill where the foundations of our castle are finally taking shape. The trenches are filled, the first stones are laid, and the air is thick with the smell of lime mortar and regret. But a castle isn't just a foundation. It's walls, towers, and a whole lot of ambition stacked high enough to make your enemies rethink their life choices. So, let's drift into the next chapter of this sleepy saga, building the walls that'll keep the barbarians at bay and the Lord's ego intact. With the foundation set, the master mason is ready to raise the walls, and this is where the castle starts to look like, well, a castle. But don't get too excited. Building walls in the Middle Ages is less about grand gestures and more about endless, repetitive labor that could bore a rock to sleep. The curtain wall, the outer defensive barrier, is the first priority. This isn't some cute garden fence. It's a hulking mass of stone, often 10 to 15 feet thick and 20 to 40 feet high, designed to laugh in the face of catapults and battering rams. The workers start by laying the lowest courses of stone, building on the foundation's footing. Each block is carefully placed, mortared, and checked for level, because a wonky wall isn't just embarrassing. It's a death trap waiting to collapse. The wall's construction is a team effort, and by team, I mean a chaotic mix of skilled masons, semi-skilled laborers, and peasants who are only here because their lord threatened to burn their village if they didn't show up. The skilled masons, trained under the master mason's watchful eye, handle the precision work, cutting stones to fit perfectly and carving decorative elements for the fancy bits, like the gatehouse. The laborers haul stones, mix mortar, and do the grunt work, while the peasants, poor souls, are stuck carrying baskets of rubble to fill the wall's core. That's right, the middle of the wall isn't solid stone. It's a sandwich of two outer layers of cut stone called ashlar, with a rubble and mortar filling, like a medieval burrito of destruction. Lifting these stones is no joke. Some weigh hundreds of pounds, and cranes haven't been invented yet. At least, not the kind you're thinking of. The workers use a treadwheel crane, a giant wooden wheel powered by people walking inside it like hamsters. 2 or 3 sweaty laborers climb in, trudge in circles, and the wheel turns a rope and pulley system to hoist stones into place. Slow, creaky, and if someone slips, you're all eating dirt. Smaller stones are carried by hand or in baskets, while scaffolding, made of lashed-together wooden poles, lets workers reach higher as the wall grows. The scaffolding is wobbly, the ropes are frayed, and falling is just part of the job description. No safety harnesses here, just a quick prayer to St. Barbara, the patron saint of people who work with dangerous stuff. As the walls rise, the master mason is obsessing over details. The wall needs to be thick, but it also needs to be smart. He adds features like a battered base, a sloping lower section that makes it harder for attackers to undermine the wall with picks or explosives. He also plans for arrow slits, narrow vertical gaps that let archers fire at enemies while staying protected. These slits are wider on the inside, narrower on the outside, so defenders have room to aim but attackers have a tiny target to hit. It's like designing a wall that says, "Go ahead, try me." The mason also thinks about drainage, because nothing ruins a castle faster than water pooling at the base and turning your foundation into medieval mush. Stone channels or weep holes are built into the walls to let rainwater escape, because even warlords can't fight Mother Nature. While the curtain wall is going up, the gatehouse is starting to take shape, and this is where things get spicy. The gatehouse is the castle's front door, but it's less welcome mat and more death funnel. It's designed to make invaders regret ever knocking. The gatehouse starts with 2 massive towers flanking a narrow passage, each tower bristling with defenses. Workers are laying stones for the towers while carpenters build a heavy wooden gate reinforced with iron. Above the gate, the mason plans for a portcullis, a spiked iron grate that drops to block the entrance. Operating it requires a winch system, which means more timber, more ropes, and more peasants turning another treadwheel like the world's most miserable gym class. The gatehouse also gets a few extra surprises. The mason includes murder holes, openings in the ceiling of the passage where defenders can drop rocks, boiling water, or worse on anyone trying to break in. There's also a drawbridge, which means digging a pit for the counterweights and building a mechanism to raise and lower it. If there's a moat, the drawbridge spans it, turning the gatehouse into an island of pain for attackers. Every stone laid here is a promise of future violence, and the workers know it. They're not just building a structure, they're building a machine designed to outlast sieges and break armies. Back at the curtain wall, the workers are starting to feel the grind. Days are long, starting at dawn and ending at dusk. Breaks are short, and lunch is a chunk of rye bread and maybe some watery ale if the Lord's feeling generous. The mortar needs constant mixing, the stones need constant hauling, and the master mason needs constant appeasing. He's pacing the site, checking every course of stone with a plumb line, shouting at anyone who sets a block crooked. The workers are tired, their hands are calloused, and their backs are screaming, but there's no stopping. The Lord wants his castle, and he wants it yesterday. If you're lucky, you get a Sunday off to pray for your sins and your blisters, but Monday morning, it's back to the grind. By now, the walls are maybe 10 feet high, and the gatehouse towers are starting to loom. The site looks less like a construction zone and more like a fortress in progress. But there's a problem. Stone isn't cheap, and neither is labor. The Lord is burning through money faster than a dragon burns through villages. He's taxing his peasants, borrowing from merchants, and maybe even pawning off a few relics to keep the project going. The master mason, meanwhile, is juggling budgets, schedules, and the Lord's unrealistic expectations. Can't you make it taller? The Lord asks, as if height grows on trees. The mason just nods, grits his teeth, and goes back to measuring angles. As the walls climb higher, the castle's silhouette is emerging. It's not just a pile of rocks anymore. It's a statement, a promise of power, a threat to enemies, and a home for a lord who's already planning his first feast in the Great Hall. But we're not there yet. The walls are only the beginning. Next, we need to build the keep, the heart of the castle, the Lord's private fortress, and the place where things get really complicated. All right, sleepy travelers, we're back in the gritty grind of 1180, where our castle is starting to take shape on a windswept hill. The curtain walls are creeping upward, the gatehouse is looking like a proper death trap, and the workers are probably dreaming of a life where they don't have to haul rocks all day. But we're not here to talk about finished castles or victory feasts. Not yet. We're diving into the heart of this stone beast, the keep. This is the Lord's private fortress, the last line of defense, and the part of the castle that says, I'm important and I'm not going anywhere. Building it is a whole new level of pain, precision, and medieval madness. So, settle into your cozy blanket, and let's explore the slow, steady process of raising a keep that could make even a Viking think twice. The keep is the castle's centerpiece, a towering stone box where the Lord and his family live, eat, and hide when the enemy comes knocking. It's not just a house, it's a fortress within a fortress, designed to hold out even if the outer walls fall. Think of it as the medieval equivalent of a panic room, except it's got a great hall, a chapel, and enough storage to survive a year-long siege. The keep's foundation was laid back when we were digging trenches, but now it's time to build upward, and that means more stone, more sweat, and more of the master mason's relentless perfectionism. Construction starts with the lower walls of the keep, and these are no ordinary walls. They're thicker than the curtain walls, sometimes 15 or 20 feet thick, because the keep has to withstand everything from battering rams to betrayal from within. The workers are back at it, hauling massive ashlar blocks and slathering mortar like it's their life's calling. The master mason is hovering, checking every stone with a plumb bob to make sure it's perfectly vertical. A crooked keep isn't just ugly, it's a structural disaster waiting to happen. The stones are laid in courses, each layer carefully aligned, with the outer face polished to a smooth finish that screams wealth and power. The inner face might be rougher, but the core is still that rubble and mortar mix, saving time and materials while keeping the walls strong. As the walls rise, the keep starts to take on its distinctive shape, a square or rectangular tower, often 3 or 4 stories tall. Some keeps, like the famous Tower of London, are massive with multiple rooms and levels. Ours is a bit more modest, but it's still a beast, maybe 50 feet high with walls that could shrug off a catapult hit. The workers are using the treadwheel crane again, its creaky wooden wheel spinning as laborers trudge inside, hoisting stones to the upper levels. Scaffolding surrounds the keep like a wooden spiderweb, letting masons work at dizzying heights. Falling is a real risk, and nobody's keeping a safety log. If you slip, you're either lucky enough to land in a pile of straw or unlucky enough to become a medieval cautionary tale. Inside the keep, the master mason is planning the layout. The ground floor is usually for storage, grain, weapons, maybe some barrels of ale for morale. There's no living down here. It's dark, damp, and smells like a mix of mold and desperation. The first floor is where the action happens. The Great Hall, where the Lord holds court, feasts with his knights, and pretends he's not worried about the neighbor who keeps eyeing his land. The hall is big, with high ceilings and space for long tables, but it's not exactly cozy. There's a fireplace, but it's more for show than warmth. Smoke tends to fill the room, and the stone walls stay cold enough to make your teeth chatter. Above the Great Hall are the private chambers for the Lord and his family. These aren't luxurious suites with 4-poster beds. They're small, drafty rooms with narrow windows and straw-stuffed mattresses. Privacy is a myth. Servants, kids, and the occasional stray dog are always underfoot. The top floor might have a solar, a slightly nicer room where the Lord's wife can sew or pray, but it's still just a stone box with a fancy name. Somewhere in the keep, there's a chapel because even warlords need to hedge their bets with the Almighty. The chapel's small, maybe big enough for a priest and a handful of sinners, with an altar and a cross carved into the stone. One of the trickiest parts of building the keep is the roof. Medieval roofs are wooden, made from massive oak beams hauled from the forest. Carpenters, who are just as skilled as the masons but way less appreciated, cut and shape the beams with adzes and saws. The beams are hoisted into place by the treadwheel crane, then fitted together like a giant puzzle. Over the beams goes a layer of planks, followed by slate tiles or, if the Lord's cheap, thatch. Thatch is a fire hazard, so most keeps go for slate, which means more trips to the quarry and more complaints from the workers. The roof needs to be steep to shed rainwater, because a leaky keep is a miserable keep, and nobody wants to sleep under a dripping ceiling. The keep also needs a staircase, and this is where medieval engineering gets clever. Most keeps have a spiral staircase, built into the thickness of the wall. Why spiral? Because it's a defender's dream. If invaders get inside, they have to fight their way up a narrow, twisting staircase, swinging swords with their right hand while the defenders above have the advantage of the curve. The stairs are carved from stone or built from wood, each step worn smooth by the time the castle's finished. Workers are carving these stairs as the walls go up, chiseling away in cramped, dark corners while trying not to trip over their own tools. By now, the keep is starting to look imposing. Its walls are 20 feet high, the towers of the gatehouse are catching up, and the curtain wall is almost complete. The workers are exhausted, the Lord is impatient, and the master mason is probably dreaming of a simpler life, like herding goats. But there's no rest yet. The castle needs more than just walls and a keep. It needs defenses that make attackers cry, a water supply that won't run dry, and a few extra touches to remind everyone who's in charge. That's where we're headed next. So close your eyes, imagine the clink of chisels, and drift off to the sound of medieval ambition. Welcome back, drowsy history buffs, to our plodding journey through the construction of a medieval castle in 1180. The keep is rising, its thick stone walls looming like a grumpy giant over the muddy hill. The curtain walls are nearly complete. The gatehouse is bristling with murder holes, and the workers are starting to wonder if they'll ever see their families again. But a castle isn't just a pile of stones. It's a machine of war, survival, and status. Now, we're diving into the details that make this fortress more than a fancy rock pile. The defenses, the water supply, and the little touches that turn a castle into a self-sufficient stronghold. So, snuggle under your blanket, let the sound of clanging tools lull you, and let's explore the next steps in this sleepy medieval epic. With the keep and curtain walls taking shape, the master mason turns his attention to making this castle a nightmare for anyone dumb enough to attack it. Defenses are the name of the game, and medieval builders didn't mess around. The curtain wall is already thick, but now it's time to add the finishing touches that make it a death trap. At regular intervals along the wall, workers start building towers, square or round, depending on the mason's mood and the lord's budget. Round towers are better because they deflect catapult stones more effectively, but they're harder to build, so our castle might stick with square ones for now. Each tower is a mini fortress with room for archers, supplies, and a few very nervous defenders. The towers get their own arrow slits, carefully angled to give archers a wide field of fire. The masons carve these slits with precision, using wooden templates to ensure consistency. The slits are narrow, barely a hand's width on the outside, but flare inward, letting defenders aim at anything from a sneaky thief to a full-blown army. Above the towers, workers are adding battlements, those jagged, tooth-like structures you see in every castle movie. These aren't just for looks. They give defenders cover to duck behind while reloading crossbows or tossing rocks. The battlements are built with merlins, the high parts, and crenels, the gaps. And some have wooden shutters for extra protection. The workers are up on scaffolding again, balancing precariously as they mortar stones into place, probably muttering about how much they hate heights. The gatehouse, our castle's front door of doom, is getting some extra love. The portcullis is now in place, its iron spikes gleaming with menace. But one gate isn't enough, so the masons add a second, creating a double gate system that traps attackers in a kill zone between two barriers. Above the passage, more murder holes are carved into the ceiling, ready to rain down everything from stones to boiling pitch. The drawbridge is fully operational, its heavy oak timbers reinforced with iron bands and counterweight with a pit full of stones. If the moat is filled, and it probably is by now thanks to a diverted stream, the drawbridge is the only way in, and raising it turns the gatehouse into an island. The workers test the mechanism, cranking the winch and praying it doesn't snap, because fixing a broken drawbridge is nobody's idea of fun. Now, let's talk about water, because nothing brings a castle to its knees faster than a dry well. Medieval sieges could last months, and if you're stuck inside with no water, you're surrendering faster than you can say, parched throat. The master mason picks a spot inside the keep or the courtyard for a well, and a team of unlucky workers starts digging. This isn't a shallow hole. Castle wells could go down 100 feet or more to reach the water table. The diggers use picks and shovels, hauling dirt up in buckets while trying not to think about the fact that they're basically buried alive. If they hit bedrock, they keep going with chisels, because giving up isn't an option. Once the well is deep enough, it's lined with stone to keep it from collapsing, and a wooden cover is added to stop debris or enemies from poisoning it. The well isn't the only water feature. The moat, if the castle has one, needs maintenance too. Workers are dredging it to keep it deep and mucky, because a shallow moat is just a fancy puddle. Some castles divert rivers or streams to keep the moat filled, which means building channels or sluices. More digging, more engineering, more complaints. The moat isn't just for defense. It's also a status symbol, because nothing says, "I'm rich," like a giant ditch full of water you didn't have to carry yourself. The workers, of course, don't care about status. They're just trying not to drown in the mud while the master mason yells about keeping the bank steep. Inside the keep, the workers are adding practical touches. The Great Hall needs a fireplace, which means building a stone hearth and a chimney that actually draws smoke out instead of choking everyone. The masons carve the chimney into the wall, angling it carefully to avoid setting the roof on fire. The Lord's chambers get narrow windows, more like arrow slits than glass panes, because big windows are an invitation for arrows or spies. The chapel gets a small altar, maybe a carved cross, and a niche for a relic, because the Lord wants divine protection as much as stone walls. Storage rooms are stocked with barrels and sacks, ready for grain, salted meat, or whatever else the Lord can hoard for a siege. The workers are also building latrines because even medieval nobles need to go. These aren't flushing toilets. They're stone seats built into the outer walls, with chutes that drop waste into the moat or a pit below. If you're lucky, the chute is long enough that the smell doesn't waft back up. If you're not, well, you get used to it. The workers carve these chutes with grim resignation, knowing they're creating the castle's least glamorous feature. Some castles have garderobes, fancy latrines with a little privacy, but ours is basic, just a hole in the wall and a dream of better hygiene. By now, the castle is looking like a proper fortress. The curtain walls are topped with battlements. The gatehouse is a maze of death. The keep is towering over the countryside, and the well is, hopefully, filling with water. The workers are exhausted. The lord is starting to plan his move-in party, and the master mason is already worrying about the next phase. The outbuildings, the courtyard, and all the little details that make a castle a home. That's where we're headed next. So let your eyes droop. Listen to the distant clink of hammers, and drift off to the rhythm of medieval construction. Hey there, weary wanderers of history. We're back in 1180, where our castle is starting to look like something you'd fear to attack. The keep stands tall, its stone walls glaring down at the countryside. The curtain walls bristle with battlements. The gatehouse is ready to ruin any invader's day, and the moat is a muddy moat of misery for anyone who tries to cross it. But a castle isn't just walls and a fancy tower. It's a living, breathing fortress that needs to function like a small city. Tonight, we're diving into the next phase. Building the outbuildings, setting up the courtyard, and turning this pile of rocks into a place where people can actually live, work, and maybe not die of boredom. So, tuck in, let the sound of chisels fade into the background, and let's drift through the slow grind of medieval construction. With the keep and walls mostly done, the master mason shifts focus to the courtyard, the open space inside the curtain walls where the castle's daily life happens. This isn't just a patch of dirt. It's the heart of the castle's community, where servants scurry, knights practice, and the lord's prize pigs occasionally escape to cause chaos. But before it can become a bustling hub, it needs buildings. Stables, kitchens, workshops, and maybe a barracks for the soldiers who are starting to wonder why they signed up for this. The courtyard is a blank canvas, but it's about to get crowded. First up, the stables. Horses are the medieval equivalent of tanks, and the lord's war horses need a place to sleep that's better than the peasants' huts. The stables are built against the inner side of the curtain wall, using a mix of stone and timber. The lower walls are stone to keep out thieves and stray arrows, but the upper parts are wooden to save money and make the structure lighter. Carpenters are hard at work, sawing oak beams and hammering planks into place for the roof. The stables need room for hay, water troughs, and enough stalls to house the lord's prized destriers, those massive horses that can carry a knight in full armor without breaking a sweat. The workers are also digging a drainage channel to keep the stable floor from turning into a swamp of horse muck, because nobody wants to shovel that every morning. Next, the kitchen. Medieval feasts don't cook themselves, and the lord expects meals that impress his guests, even if it's just boiled mutton and gritty bread. The kitchen is usually a separate building to reduce the risk of fire spreading to the keep. It's a simple structure: stone walls, a timber roof, and a massive hearth that could roast an entire cow. The masons build the hearth with a wide chimney to vent smoke, while carpenters construct tables and shelves for the cooks, who are already muttering about the lack of spices. The kitchen also needs a well or a water cistern nearby, because hauling buckets from the main well across the courtyard is a recipe for spilled water and angry servants. The workers dig a shallow pit for the cistern, line it with stone, and pray it doesn't leak. The blacksmith's workshop is another must-have. Every castle needs a smith to forge horseshoes, repair armor, and make nails for the carpenters who keep breaking theirs. The forge is built with a stone foundation and a low roof to trap heat, with a bellows system to keep the fire roaring. The blacksmith is already on site, probably arguing with the master mason about where to put the anvil. The forge is a noisy, smoky place, and the workers building it are coughing through clouds of dust while hauling stones for the hearth. Nearby, they're setting up a carpenter's workshop, where saws and adzes churn out everything from door frames to arrow shafts. These workshops are simple, wooden sheds with dirt floors, but they're the backbone of the castle's self-sufficiency. The barracks come next, because the lord's soldiers need somewhere to sleep when they're not patrolling the walls or drinking the castle's entire ale supply. The barracks are a long, low building, often built against the curtain wall to save space. The walls are stone or wattle and daub, a mix of mud, straw, and sticks that's surprisingly sturdy, and the roof is thatch or slate. Inside, it's basic. Straw pallets for beds, a small hearth for warmth, and not much else. The soldiers don't get luxury. They get a roof and a place to store their weapons. The workers building the barracks are grumbling about how the knights will probably complain anyway. But they keep hammering away, knowing the Lord's temper is worse than a soldier's whining. The courtyard itself needs work too. The ground is a muddy mess from all the construction traffic. So workers are laying down gravel or packed earth to keep it from turning into a bog. They're also building a few smaller structures. A granary for storing grain, a dovecot for pigeons because fresh eggs and messenger birds are a big deal, and maybe a small garden for herbs and vegetables. The garden is a luxury, but the Lord's wife insists on it for medicinal plants and something to look at beside stone walls. The workers dig beds, haul in soil, and try not to roll their eyes when the lady of the castle starts talking about rosemary and thyme. All this building means more materials, more labor, and more headaches for the master mason. The quarry is still churning out stone, but now the carpenters are demanding more timber, and the blacksmith needs charcoal for the forge. The Lord is starting to notice the cost. Building a castle can bankrupt even a rich noble. He's taxing his peasants to the bone, selling off land, or borrowing from shady merchants who charge interest rates that would make a modern banker blush. The workers, meanwhile, are surviving on bread, ale, and the occasional chunk of cheese, dreaming of a day when they can go back to plowing fields instead of hauling rocks. By now, the castle is a hive of activity. The keep towers over everything. The curtain walls are topped with battlements, and the courtyard is filling with buildings that make this place feel like a real community. The master mason is starting to see his vision come to life, but he's also got a new problem: time. The Lord wants to move in, the workers want to go home, and the weather is turning wet, which means delays, mud, and more shouting matches. But there's still work to do. Finishing touches, decorations, and making sure this castle is ready for its first siege or feast, whichever comes first. That's where we're headed next. So let your eyelids droop, listen to the hum of medieval labor, and drift off to the sound of a castle coming alive. We're deep in the muddy, stone-strewn world of 1180, where our castle is finally starting to feel like more than a construction site. The keep looms like a grumpy stone giant, the curtain walls bristle with towers, and the courtyard is buzzing with stables, kitchens, and workshops. The workers are exhausted. The Lord is itching to hang his banners, and the master mason is probably regretting every life choice that led him here. But building a castle isn't just about stacking stones. It's about making it livable, defensible, and impressive enough to make the neighboring lord choke on his ale. Tonight, we're diving into the next phase, adding the finishing touches, from decorating the keep to fortifying the defenses, and making sure this fortress is ready for its close-up. So, nestle into your pillow, let the distant clatter of hammers soothe you, and let's wander through the final stages of this medieval marathon. With the major structures in place, the master mason is now orchestrating a symphony of smaller tasks to turn this fortress into a home. First up, the keep's interior needs some serious attention. The Great Hall is a cavernous space, but it's not exactly welcoming yet. Think cold stone walls, smoky air, and a floor that's basically packed dirt. To make it fit for feasting, workers start with the walls. They're not painting them. Paint's a luxury for later centuries. But they might plaster and whitewash them to brighten the space and cover the rough stone. The plaster is made from lime and sand, applied with trowels by skilled laborers who are trying not to drip it on their boots. Whitewash, a mix of lime and chalk, is slathered on with brushes, giving the hall a clean, if slightly streaky, look that says, "We tried." The Great Hall also needs furnishings, which means the carpenters are back, cursing their blunt saws as they craft trestle tables and benches. These aren't fancy. They're heavy oak planks nailed together, designed to be collapsible so the hall can double as a sleeping area for visiting knights or a hospital during a siege. The Lord's high table gets a bit more love, maybe carved with his crest or draped with a cloth if he's feeling extravagant. A massive fireplace dominates the hall, and the masons are finishing its hearth, stacking stones and testing the chimney to make sure it draws smoke out instead of trapping it. The floor might get a layer of rushes, dried grass mixed with herbs like lavender to mask the smell of spilled ale and dog hair. It's not exactly a plush carpet, but it's better than dirt. The Lord's chambers upstairs are getting similar treatment, but with a touch more comfort. The walls are plastered, and the narrow windows might get wooden shutters to keep out the wind. A bed frame is built, nothing like a modern bed, just a wooden box filled with straw or wool and topped with a blanket that smells faintly of sheep. The Lord's wife might insist on tapestries to warm the room and show off their wealth. These are woven by skilled artisans off-site, costing a fortune, and depict scenes of battles, hunts, or saints to remind everyone who's in charge. Hanging them requires iron rods and hooks, which the blacksmith is hammering out while grumbling about the masons stealing his tools. The chapel in the keep is another priority, because the Lord wants God on his side, especially if the neighbors start eyeing his land. The masons carve a simple stone altar, maybe inlaid with a cross or a relic if the Lord's got one to spare. The walls might get a fresco, a painting done on wet plaster, showing a saint or a scene from the Bible. A local artist, probably a monk with a shaky hand, is brought in for this using pigments made from ground minerals and egg yolk. The result is crude but holy, and that's good enough for a castle where nobody's expecting the Sistine Chapel. Outside, the workers are beefing up the defenses. The battlements on the curtain walls need hoarding, wooden platforms that jut out over the edge, letting defenders drop rocks or shoot arrows straight down at attackers trying to scale the walls. The carpenters build these platforms with oak planks, supported by angled beams that look like giant braces. The hoardings are removable, so they don't rot in peacetime, but they're ready to be slapped up when trouble comes. The towers get extra attention, with wooden floors inside for archers and storage for weapons. The masons are also adding machicolations, stone brackets under the battlements that serve the same purpose as hoardings but are permanent and way scarier. The moat, if it's part of the plan, is now fully functional, its murky water reflecting the castle's growing silhouette. Workers are building a wooden bridge to span it, leading to the drawbridge at the gatehouse. The bridge is sturdy but designed to be destroyed in a siege, cutting off access. Some castles add a barbican, a fortified outpost in front of the gatehouse, but ours is keeping it simple for now. The workers are also clearing the land around the castle, chopping down trees and leveling hills to create a clear field of fire for archers. No sneaky enemies hiding in the bushes here. The courtyard is coming alive too. The granary is stocked with sacks of barley and wheat, hauled in from the Lord's fields. The dovecot is finished, its cooing pigeons already annoying the stable hands. The herb garden is planted, with neat rows of sage and mint that the Lord's wife checks daily, probably lecturing the gardeners about proper weeding. The blacksmith's forge is glowing, the carpenter's saws are humming, and the kitchen is sending up smoke as the cooks test the hearth with a pot of pottage that smells vaguely edible. By now, the castle is almost ready for the Lord to move in, but there's still work to do. The master mason is tying up loose ends, checking walls for cracks, and arguing with the Lord about why adding another tower isn't a great idea when the budget's already gone. The workers are starting to see the end of their labor, but they're also dreading the next project the Lord might dream up. The castle is a fortress, a home, and a symbol, but it's not done until it's been tested by time, weather, or war. That's where we're headed next. So let your mind wander, listen to the creak of the drawbridge, and drift off to the hum of a castle nearly complete. The fortress is nearly complete. Its stone keep towering over the muddy hill like a silent promise of power. The curtain walls are battle-ready. The gatehouse is a gauntlet of doom, and the courtyard hums with stables, kitchens, and the faint cooing of pigeons who've already claimed the dovecot. The workers are bone-tired. The Lord is planning his first grand feast, and the master mason is probably wondering if he'll ever get paid. But a castle isn't finished just because the walls are up. It needs to be tested, furnished, and made ready for the chaos of medieval life. Tonight, we're exploring the final preparations, from stocking supplies to carving the Lord's crest, and making sure the stronghold can survive a siege, a storm, or a very bad party. So, sink into your pillow, let the distant clink of chisels fade, and let's wander through the last steps of this sleepy stone saga. At this stage, the castle is a fortress in form, but it's not yet a functioning machine. The Master Mason is now focused on turning it into a self-sufficient stronghold that can withstand anything: enemy armies, harsh winters, or the Lord's questionable taste in interior decorators. First up, stocking the castle for survival. A siege could last months, so the Lord needs enough supplies to keep his household fed, armed, and moderately happy while arrows fly outside. The granary in the courtyard is already filling with sacks of barley, wheat, and rye, hauled in from nearby fields by ox carts that creak under the weight. Workers are stacking the sacks on wooden pallets to keep them off the damp floor, because moldy grain is a one-way ticket to starvation. The storage rooms in the keep are next. Servants are rolling in barrels of salted pork, dried fish, and wheels of cheese that smell like a peasant's worst nightmare. These aren't gourmet treats. They're survival food, designed to last through a long siege without turning into a science experiment. The Lord Steward, a fussy man with a wax tablet and a permanent frown, is counting every barrel and scribbling notes to make sure nobody's sneaking in extra sausage. There's also ale, lots of it, stored in wooden casks, because water from the moat isn't exactly drinkable, and nobody trusts the well to last forever. The workers are hauling these casks down spiral staircases, cursing every step as they try not to drop a 200-pound barrel on their toes. Weapons are just as important as food. The armory, a stone-walled room off the courtyard, is being stocked with swords, spears, and crossbows, all forged by the blacksmith who's still grumpy about his stolen hammer. The workers are building racks to hold the weapons, while the Lord's knights inspect each blade, probably complaining that the balance isn't quite right. Arrows are piled in bundles, their iron tips gleaming in the torchlight, and barrels of pitch are stored nearby for flaming missiles. The Master Mason is also making sure the towers have stone stockpiles for hurling at attackers, because nothing says go away like a well-aimed boulder. The castle's defenses get a final once-over. The Master Mason walks the walls with his assistants, checking for weak spots or cracks that could spell disaster. The battlements are tested. Workers climb up and pretend to be archers, making sure the merlins provide enough cover. The hoardings, those wooden platforms for dropping rocks, are assembled and dismantled to ensure they work in a pinch. The gatehouse is put through its paces. The portcullis is raised and lowered, the drawbridge is cranked up and down, and the murder holes are inspected to make sure they're ready to rain misery on invaders. The workers are starting to take pride in their work, even if they're still muttering about the lack of decent food. Inside the keep, the Great Hall is getting its final touches. The carpenters have finished the tables, and now they're building a dais, a raised platform for the Lord's high table, because nothing says power like eating 2 feet above everyone else. The walls are hung with tapestries, delivered by a merchant who's charging enough to buy a small village. The tapestries are heavy, woven with scenes of the Lord's ancestors, real or imagined, slaying dragons or praying piously. Servants are hammering iron hooks into the walls to hold them, trying not to tear the fabric and earn a week in the stocks. The fireplace is tested, its massive logs sending up sparks that hopefully don't set the rushes on fire. The Lord's chambers are almost ready for move-in day. The bed is stuffed with wool, and a fur blanket, probably wolf or bear, is draped over it to keep the Lord warm in the drafty room. A wooden chest, carved with the Lord's crest, is brought in for storing clothes and valuables. The lady of the castle is fussing over the solar, insisting on a cushioned bench and a small table for her embroidery, because even warlords' wives need hobbies. The chapel is consecrated by a local priest, who sprinkles holy water and mutters prayers to ward off demons and bad luck. A small reliquary, maybe holding a saint's finger bone, is placed on the altar, because the Lord's not taking any chances with divine wrath. The exterior needs some flair too. The masons are carving the Lord's coat of arms above the gatehouse. A lion, a cross, or some other symbol that screams, "I'm important." This isn't just decoration. It's a warning to enemies and a boast to allies. The carving is slow work, with chisels chipping away at the stone while the mason squints to make sure every line is perfect. Some castles add gargoyles, grotesque stone faces that double as water spouts, but ours keeps it simple, sticking to functional drains that won't scare the servants. By now, the castle is almost ready to open for business. The workers are cleaning up, hauling away leftover timber and rubble, while the Lord's household starts moving in. Servants, cooks, and a few knights who are already arguing over who gets the best spot in the barracks. The master mason is making his final rounds, double-checking the well, the walls, and the latrines, because nothing ruins a castle's reputation like a backed-up chute. The Lord is thrilled, planning a feast to show off his new digs, but the workers are just counting the days until they can go home. There's just one more step, testing the castle's readiness for life, war, and everything in between. That's where we're headed next. So let your thoughts drift, hear the rustle of tapestries, and float off to the rhythm of a castle coming to life. The keep stands proud, its stone walls gleaming under the cloudy sky. The curtain walls are a fortress of fear. The gatehouse is ready to chew up invaders, and the courtyard is alive with the clatter of kitchens, stables, and the occasional pigeon flapping out of the dovecot. The workers are on their last legs. The Lord is practically drooling over his new stronghold, and the master mason is one misplaced stone away from a nervous breakdown. But a castle isn't truly complete until it's been tested, not just for strength, but for its ability to function as a home, a fortress, and a symbol of medieval might. Tonight, we're diving into the final checks, the move-in process, and the first real test of this stone giant. So, curl up, let the faint echo of creaking drawbridges lull you, and let's wander through the last steps of our medieval masterpiece. With the castle structures finished and the supplies stocked, the master mason is now in quality control mode, making sure every part of this fortress is ready for action. This isn't just about checking for loose stones. It's about ensuring the castle can survive a siege, a storm, or the Lord's first attempt at hosting a tournament. The workers are dragged back for one last round of tasks, grumbling as they sweep debris and fix minor flaws. The mason starts with the walls, walking the battlements with a sharp eye for cracks or weak mortar joints. He taps stones with a hammer, listening for the telltale hollow sound of a bad fit. If he finds one, the unlucky mason who laid it gets a lecture that could curdle ale. The gatehouse is tested rigorously. The portcullis is raised and lowered a dozen times, its iron spikes clanging as they slide into place. The workers crank the winch, sweating and praying the ropes hold, because a stuck portcullis is an invitation for disaster. The drawbridge gets the same treatment, creaking as it's hoisted and dropped, its counterweights thudding in their pit. The murder holes are inspected, with a few brave or foolish workers standing below while others toss pebbles through to test the aim. The moat is checked for depth. Servants wade in with poles, cursing the cold water and the eels that nobody warned them about. Everything has to work perfectly, because a single weak point could turn this fortress into a very expensive tomb. Inside the keep, the Great Hall is prepped for its first feast. Servants are scrubbing the whitewashed walls and spreading fresh rushes on the floor, which already smell faintly of mint and regret. The trestle tables are set up, wobbling slightly because the carpenters were rushing, and the high table is draped with a cloth embroidered with the Lord's crest. The fireplace is lit for a test run, sending smoke up the chimney while the steward frets about soot stains. The cooks are in the kitchen, boiling a cauldron of pottage to feed the workers one last time, though the smell suggests they've already run out of decent ingredients. The Lord's wife is inspecting the solar, rearranging the cushions and muttering about how the tapestries aren't hung straight. The well is a major concern. The master mason orders a bucket lowered to check the water level, and everyone holds their breath as it comes up clear, not muddy or, worse, empty. The well's stone lining is inspected for leaks, and the wooden cover is reinforced to keep out debris or sabotage. The granary and storage rooms are double-checked, with the steward counting every sack of grain and barrel of salted fish to ensure they'll last a siege. The armory is organized, with swords and spears neatly racked, though the knights are already bickering over who gets the shiniest blade. The blacksmith is hammering out last-minute repairs, while the carpenter is fixing a wobbly bench in the barracks that nobody noticed until now. The castle's move-in day is approaching, and the Lord's household is arriving in a chaotic parade of carts, horses, and squawking chickens. Servants are hauling chests of clothes and kitchen gear into the keep, tripping over the spiral staircase and cursing the architect who thought it was a good idea. The Lord's hounds are already marking their territory in the courtyard, much to the annoyance of the stable hands. The lady of the castle is directing traffic, pointing out where to hang her favorite tapestry and scolding a servant for dropping a candlestick. The lord himself is strutting around, admiring the coat of arms carved above the gatehouse and probably planning how to brag about his new castle at the next noble gathering. But before the lord can throw his big opening bash, the castle needs a real test. The master mason organizes a mock siege. Nothing too serious, just enough to make sure everything works. Workers and local peasants are roped in to play the attackers, armed with blunted spears and a lot of enthusiasm. The castle's defenders, knights, archers, and a few overeager servants, man the walls, firing practice arrows and dropping sacks of straw through the murder holes. The drawbridge is raised, the portcullis slammed shut, and the attackers try to cross the moat on makeshift rafts, most of which sink hilariously. The lord watches from the keep, laughing as the peasants flail, but the master mason is taking notes, watching how the defenses hold and where improvements are needed. The test reveals a few hiccups: a sticky portcullis winch, a battlement with a loose stone, and a latrine chute that's already backing up, to everyone's horror. The workers are sent to fix these issues, muttering about how they thought they were done. The mason also tweaks the hoardings, adding extra bracing to make them sturdier. The mock siege is a success, though, proving the castle can hold its own, even if the enemy was just a bunch of farmers with sticks. The lord is thrilled, the knights are itching for a real fight, and the workers are just glad nobody got hurt. By now, the castle is ready to stand as a symbol of the lord's power. The workers are packing up their tools, the master mason is sketching plans for his next project, and the lord is planning a feast to christen his new home. But there's one final chapter: living in the castle, weathering its first storms, and proving it can endure the test of time. That's where we're headed next, so let your mind float, hear the crackle of the great hall's fire, and drift off to the rhythm of a castle ready to face the world. Welcome back, sleepy wanderers, to the final chapter of our long, soothing journey through the construction of a medieval castle in 1180. The fortress is complete, its keep towering over the hill like a stone sentinel. The curtain walls stand defiant, the gatehouse bristles with deadly traps, and the courtyard hums with the chaos of cooks, knights, and pigeons who've made the dovecot their kingdom. The workers have packed their tools, the master mason is probably halfway to his next job, and the lord is basking in the glory of his new stronghold. Tonight, we're exploring what happens next. Life in the castle, its first challenges, and how this pile of stones becomes a legend that endures for centuries. So, burrow into your blankets, let the faint creak of a distant drawbridge lull you, and let's drift through the final pages of this medieval epic. The castle is now a living, breathing fortress, and move-in day is in full swing. The lord's household has settled in, turning the keep into a noisy mix of barking dogs, clattering pots, and servants tripping over the spiral staircase. The Great Hall is the heart of it all, where the lord holds his first feast to show off his new digs. Trestle tables groan under platters of roasted venison, boiled roots, and bread so hard it could double as a weapon. The fireplace roars, casting shadows on the tapestries as knights swap stories, and the lord's minstrel strums a lute, slightly out of tune. The air smells of smoke, sweat, and ale, and the rushes on the floor are already collecting crumbs and spilled gravy. The lord's wife is at the high table, smiling politely while mentally redecorating the solar. Life in the castle settles into a rhythm. The courtyard is a hive of activity. Blacksmiths hammer horseshoes, carpenters repair a wobbly bench, and cooks shout at servants for burning the pottage. The stables are full of snorting war horses, tended by grooms who dodge hooves and dream of less smelly jobs. The granary and storage rooms are checked daily by the steward, who's still counting every sack of grain like it's his life's mission. The well is a lifeline, its water hauled up in buckets to fill the kitchen cistern and the lord's washing basin, though washing is more of a suggestion than a habit. The latrines, mercifully, are working, though the moat below them is starting to smell like a medieval health hazard. The castle's defenses are kept sharp. Knights patrol the walls, grumbling about the wind but secretly enjoying the view. Archers practice in the courtyard, firing at straw targets while the Lord's hounds steal their arrows. The gatehouse is manned day and night, with guards cranking the portcullis for every cart of firewood or merchant selling overpriced cloth. The drawbridge stays up unless someone important arrives, because the Lord's not taking chances with bandits or that shady neighbor who keeps accidentally grazing his sheep on the wrong land. The moat is dredged regularly, its muddy depths hiding who knows what from the last siege drill. The castle's first real test comes with the seasons. Winter hits hard, turning the courtyard into a frozen mud pit and the keep into a drafty icebox. The fireplace in the great hall struggles to warm the stone walls, and the Lord's family huddles under firs, cursing the narrow windows that let in more cold than light. The granary and storage rooms prove their worth, feeding the household when snow buries the roads. The well holds steady, its water icy but clear, and the steward breathes a sigh of relief that they didn't skimp on supplies. The workers who built the castle are long gone, but their work stands firm, the walls shrugging off storms and the roof shedding snow like it's nothing. Spring brings a different challenge. The Lord's rival, some earl with a grudge and too many knights, starts rattling sabers. Rumors of a siege send the castle into high alert. The granary is topped off, the armory is stocked with extra arrows, and the blacksmith works overtime sharpening swords. The drawbridge is raised, the portcullis lowered, and the hoardings are slapped onto the battlements. Archers man the towers, squinting through arrow slits, while servants haul stones to the walls for dropping on anyone who gets too close. The moat does its job, slowing the enemy's approach, and the gatehouse's murder holes are ready to unleash chaos. The siege never materializes. The rival backs off when he sees the castle's defenses, but the Lord struts like he's won a war, and the knights celebrate with enough ale to float a ship. As years pass, the castle becomes more than a fortress. It's a home, a court, and a symbol of the Lord's power. Tournaments are held in the fields outside, with knights jousting and peasants cheering for free food. The Great Hall hosts weddings, trials, and the occasional brawl when someone insults the Lord's wine. The chapel sees baptisms and funerals, its altar worn smooth by praying hands. The castle's walls are scarred by time. Rain erodes the mortar, ivy creeps up the towers, but they stand strong, a testament to the master mason's skill and the workers' sweat. The castle's legacy grows. Stories spread of its impregnable walls, its moat that swallowed an enemy's siege tower, or the feast where the Lord fed 200 guests without running out of mutton. Future generations add their own touches. A new tower, a fancier chapel, or a bigger latrine chute when the moat starts complaining. The castle endures wars, sieges, and the occasional fire, each mark on its stones a chapter in its story. Centuries later, it might stand as a ruin, its keep half collapsed but still proud, or it might be a tourist trap with gift shops selling plastic swords. Either way, it's a monument to the people who built it. The masons, the laborers, the peasants who hauled rocks and dreamed of rest. And with that, our tale of castle building comes to a close. The workers have gone home, the Lord is ruling his domain, and the master mason is probably somewhere else, arguing with another noble about why you can't build a tower on a swamp. The castle stands as a silent witness to history, its stones whispering of battles, feasts, and lives long past. So, as you drift off, imagine the flicker of torches in the Great Hall, the creak of the drawbridge, and the hum of a fortress that took years to build but centuries to forget. Good night, and may your dreams be as sturdy as those medieval walls.